Victoria 3's very first expansion, Voice of the People, release date May the 22nd, 2023, adds a whole load of new stuff, and of course there's a real focus around France. This is a French DLC at its core, and it's accompanied by 60 plus new historical roles that are actually a real pleasure to interact with in-game. The new character interactions are a nice fit, a sort of a Crusader Kings 3-esque way to add a bit more flavour to Victoria 3. And if you get the paid expansion pack, you'll get this wonderful French UI, new French buildings, and 60 historical agitators. However, jumping into a game with that disabled, but with the free patch, the 1.3 update enabled, you can see that there's still a lot to offer. For example, the map changes like the dissolution of Algeria into 4 independent states is entirely free, and you can play that out. You can also, of course, if you wish, come over to my neck of the woods and visit a place like Tahiti. Those map changes are, of course, relatively minor, though, in the grand scheme of things, because plenty of other things have changed in Victoria 3, like the new land reform laws. All of these changes, though, and Paradox have said this themselves, are all designed to make internal politics more interesting. And of course, with the Voice of the People expansion pack, there's a real focus around French politics, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But regardless of whether you've got the DLC or not, inside of patch 1.3 you will get this fantastic new overview. And even right from the beginning of the game, it's really useful to get a feel as to where your radicalism is coming from, the kind of populations that support you, and of course, how that plays out with the kind of laws that you're passing. Because the law system has also been revamped. It now takes much longer with this referral, drafting, and then voting phase, and you have to sort of get past each one of those now, instead of just trying to pass the law once and it being done. What it does, though, is it gives breathing room for flavor. It gives breathing room for the game's internal politics and the kind of world building that they're trying to establish in patch 1.3 and in Voice of the People, a little bit more space to flourish. As you can see here, I'm trying to change the structure of my economy while also expanding France's borders to gobble up a little bit of Switzerland. But the real focus for me here is to try and get this law passed. Wham bam, thank you ma'am, it's through. That one, not particularly difficult. However, if you try and reach into something a little more controversial, like for example, getting rid of the monarchy and establishing the new French Republic, you might notice that the revolution system has changed too. Another key element of Victoria 3's internal politics that's had not only a really nice facelift, i.e. it looks better on the map, it's visualized better, but also again, the way that we interact with it is much better. The breathing room that's been given here to allow, in particular, events to flourish, while journal entries are also a significant focus of the DLC, the paid DLC in particular, the broader system, and at the free version or within Voice of the People, works really well. Basically, it ends up being this kind of race to enact, where on the one hand you have a revolutionary sector of your population growing and expanding visually across the country as you hover over the revolution overview, and that's slowly ticking up. And then you can choose to use events, in-game events to do with the new characters in particular, but also, of course, more broadly, the kind of ones that we've always expected around our nation, radicalism, that kind of thing, are playing out, fighting against each other. On the one hand, my populations are growing more radical, and on the other hand, I'm using events, public discourse, potentially some quite aggressive ones too, around, using the military to shut them down, using force to try and play it off against each other. Can I pass the presidential republic in time before the revolution gains enough support to take over? And of course, if they do that, well, then the entire nation will change. It will become the Kingdom of France, in this case, versus the new independent Republic of France. And the two of those will fight off against each other. One of them will come out on top. I think the system at its core works very well. If you like the events that have already existed inside of Victoria 3, then I think you'll really enjoy the free update and the expansion pack. Of course, the expansion pack does have a particular focus around France with the French UI, the new French buildings. So it makes sense that you're going to want to really delve into the world that it builds around France before you start to look elsewhere. But it is important to note that not all of the 60 historical agitators that are included inside of the DLC pack are French alone, and you can find many more from many different parts of the world, especially Europe, but also places like China and a few others. As you lean into the new politics, the new overview system, it starts to kind of take a life of its own. You can interact, for example, with the events relating to your revolutions right here on the overview screen. You can also see, of course, how quickly the revolution is passing, the laws that you're trying to pass, and of course, the new agitator's role. The agitator's role, of course, itself is not actually just part of the paid DLC. No. You'll get agitators entirely for free. You won't, however, get as extensive of a list, nor will you see as many historical agitators. Most of the history is grounded inside of the paid expansion. However, again, I have to give a kudos and a shout out to the free patch 1.3. It adds enough agitators into the mix. Many of them will relate to your country. They'll be leaders of interest groups, or they'll be pushing some of the many new ideologies that are, again, included inside of the free patch, from technocrats to positivists. All of it, even the Orleanists, you can access entirely for free. As you move through, though, and you start to build up that new system and you start to engage with the agitators a bit more, you'll also start to interact with characters on, I found, 2 different levels. On the one level, using the new interactions, like exiling agitators, for example, maybe recruiting new ones in, but then on the other level, at the population side. In this case, I'm fighting desperately to try and pass this presidential republic, again in a battle between trying to pass a law and working with the events to do so, while my revolutionaries fight, and there I have success. But there were other tools that I could pull there as well, like dealing with specific population groups, finding employment opportunities for them, building more universities, for example, to support my intelligentsia, or maybe striking down a war near our former French territories, of course, as we reach into Africa to try and secure extra resources and help the militarists among our population thrive. The other levers that you can pull, of course, obvious ones being like taxation or using the new legal system against them. Passing a new free law, by the way, like state atheism, to really drown out the religious voice in my country was one way to try and stifle future pesky revolutions. The other way, of course, could be to strike the opponent down with war, but I found the new laws and the new legal system to be much more enjoyable than the past. It helped to keep me more interested. I tended to be a player that was often reaching out looking for more borders to grab. Warfare in Victoria 3 is, of course, an entirely separate issue, and I should note, it's one that didn't really change much in this patch. Whether it was the free update or the paid DLC, nothing really focused on warfare at all. Warfare was changed a little bit before, of course, in 1.2, as you've seen in this gameplay, adding strategic objectives, adding more variables to battles, and it's slightly more interesting, but it won't deliver that kind of tactile, hands-on experience that you might expect from other Paradox games, like Hearts of Iron, for example. This new system, though, with the character interactions, the ability to invite or exile agitators, each one of them, of course, having their own political ideas, their ideologies, but also they'll push for certain revolutions. So you can really game the system much better now. You can bring in a lot of different things to change the laws of your country. And of course, the legal system itself has been changed. Here, again, the example of the French technocracy, just one of the new examples that are offered inside of the free patch 1.3. Back to the paid update then. What does the expansion include, and is it worth a buy? The ultimate question of this video, let's draw on that now. I think that patch 1.3, the free update for Victoria 3, outweighs the value of the expansion pass. And I'm just going to put that out there right now, the expansion pack, I should say, does not compare to the kind of value that you can get out of the free update. Of course, Jumbo, you might say it's free, and you're absolutely right? Everybody can get it. But more importantly, I think that most of the core systems, the agitators, the new political overview, the new laws, the changes to the map, all of those things are included inside of patch 1.3. But then it does get taken to the next level, I must say. The Voice of the People pack does take it to the next level. It enables a lot of extra historical flavor. So it builds on the events, etc. that are added in the free update, and they are wide-reaching and thoroughly enjoyable, and it adds more history in. It also makes French playthroughs much better. with specific events such as the Paris Commune, really wide-sweeping, multi-year, incredibly interesting events are exclusive to the Voice of the People pack. However, as I've mentioned, if you don't have that pack, there is plenty more things to keep you interested and engaged just in and around the new agitators system itself, let alone all of the changes to laws that go along with it. So then what do I think of Voice of the People? Is it worth a buy? I think if you've got Voice of the People as part of that wider, maybe, you pre-ordered it, you've got Victoria 3, you've got a lot of other DLC coming, I think it's a great addition to Victoria 3. And please don't get me wrong when I say what I'm about to say next, because I think it's wonderful. But I think it's outclassed by the changes that come in patch 1.3, and I'm actually really grateful and thankful for that, because I think that 1.3 adds a lot more diversity to Victoria 3 and a lot more flavor, and that's available to everyone. The paid pack should be bought by people who want to play as France, and I think that goes without saying. The change in the visuals as well, the new map overview, the UI, the buildings, will add a lot of extra value to people who play a lot of Victoria 3. So not only those who are interested in French campaigns, but also those of you who play a lot, this is a great buy for you. If you haven't really played Victoria 3 much since launch, or you're thinking about picking up Victoria 3 for the first time, taking advantage of perhaps a 20% off discount that might be running at launch of the expansion pack, then I would hold off. I think you should sit down and play patch 1.3 first. See what it has to offer. Play around with the new legal system. Play around with the new events. Bring in some agitators and experience that new revolution and revolt system, which has taken a mechanic that was previously a little murky, perhaps a little frustrating, and really brought it into the limelight, in my opinion. It's made it much more enjoyable to work with, and while there's still an element of randomness, of course, in the events, you don't quite know if you'll get the desired outcome or not all of the time, it is a much more transparent system. And I think that if you sit down and play patch 1.3, you might find that it provides enough value and enough enjoyment that you can hold off on Voice of the People. Perhaps consider it down the line if patch 1.3 is enough to pull you back in. Let me know what you think below about the changes that were added with Voice of the People, and of course the accompanying free update, patch 1.3, and whether you agree with my take. I think that Voice of the People is a great expansion pack. It adds a lot of flavor, but it won't be for everybody. And at a $15 US price point, it also may not necessarily fit within your budget right now on Victoria 3 spending. So jump in, try out the free update, and see what you think, and then let me know below. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.